This episode today is going to talk about a different topic that I have had swirling around in my mind for several weeks, and I want to just put it on record. And this is just observations, nothing more. And I'm sharing my observations. You check with your source self if this is information that you determine is important for you to just kind of know about or not. And that's it. Take it or leave it. It's very simple. It's just me sharing observations, what I've perceived happening in the game. All right, so let's get into this. So, back in January, I was excited that the History of the World Part 2 was coming out on Hulu. So, I started to watch it and I decided I didn't like it. I didn't like the writing. But I did notice in the narration of the first 2.5, 15 minutes in Mel Brooks says something in the narration where he's talking about the American Civil War in 1866, not the one that's happening in 2024 next year. So I heard that and, of course, made a mental note. But so there's that. Then I want to cover the past several years. So when you look back to when Trump got elected in the United States, it was 2017. Okay. And he really just progressively got worse. He incited a lot of people. He made a lot of people angry. When he got elected, that caused a massive outcry and uprising of people just acting outward and a lot of polarization overall. Left and right was very polarized. Okay. So that was like just constant. There was always something with him coming out of his mouth, just making people, because he gaslit the American public for so long. Then 2019, COVID starts breaking out. It hits the US in 2020. We go into lockdown, right? In March of 2020, March 17th, we went into lockdown in the East Coast. So everybody's holed up in their houses, in their apartments. They can't go out. They can't socialize, all this stuff. They're freaking out. They can't get groceries. The groceries are getting sold out. They're not getting replenished. The paper goods are getting sold out. They're not getting replenished. All this stuff is happening. So people are just scared, anxious, worried, frustrated, all of these things. It's a perfect storm, right? So there's that. May, George Floyd gets killed. Okay. That sets people off, right? Causes riots, causes BLM, causes racial tensions to be at all-time highs and just really set things off even more, right? That happens. So that goes on for a while. Then there's more stuff that I'm trying to remember because I keep forgetting things. All right. So we finally start to get a break towards the end of 2020 where we can now maybe resume life somewhat normally. But we're still wearing masks for at least another year, which was getting really tiring. Still in lockdown. Like those few weeks that they told us ended up being almost 3 years, right? In total. There's that. So people kind of go back to life, but it destroys the economy. Destroys the economy. Yeah, we got our little um uh boosters that they gave us. Our I can't remember what they are. The money that they gave us to get the economy rolling, right? There was that. But it destroyed certain businesses. It destroyed shopping malls, it destroyed restaurants in most cases, and it just overall changed the landscape of everything. It hasn't gone back exactly the way it is, for a long time. So there's that. Um, then what happens is everybody starts moving out of the cities. They start going back home where they came from. They start mass exodus of Los Angeles and New York City. A lot of people moved up to Connecticut, which is where I was, and they started buying houses. They started renting apartments, and there became a housing shortage in my area. And in New York City, there was this overflow of available property for rent and they couldn't rent them. So they chose to lower the rents to get people in there. They got rent for a year. And then when those leases were up, they jacked the rents up on them like $1,400, if not more in some cases. So those people had no choice but to move because they couldn't afford those rent increases. There's that. Okay. I know there are other things. I'm really trying to cover all my points. So these are the different things, right? Then so there's all that going on. So then people are talking about quiet quitting. They're talking about they don't want to go back to the office. They like remote work, all this stuff. And then at the end of So then we also had the insurrection, right? That happened in January 2021 when Biden takes office. Trump incites all these people to um, charge the Capitol building. And that was mass chaos. Okay. So big craziness, right? All that. But so now you've got people that are like experiencing like housing issues because what also was happening was that people were moving out of state. A lot of houses came on the market and inventory was available, and a lot of that inventory was getting gobbled up by private equity firms. So, private equity firms have purchased a lot of homes and they're holding them and they're renting them to people now. They're not putting those houses back up for sale. They're holding them and renting them for astronomical prices. And then the apartments, the luxury apartment buildings, which are going up everywhere, what they do is they keep their capacity at about 70%. They never fully fill up their apartments. And they do this in the city too, even more. They'd rather have these apartments sit empty than rent them out at lower market value because they don't want to renovate the older apartments in New York City. They don't want to renovate it because they have to stay with rent stability, rent stabilization. Um, so there's that. But the luxury apartments, they keep the capacity at a certain amount so that they can justify keeping the prices where they are and keep jacking them up because it gives the illusion that there is scarcity when they are deliberately keeping apartments off the market. And I notice it all the time because I go by those buildings that these particular buildings that like I see that there's always a certain amount of apartment buildings that are never lit up at night. So I know that there's nobody renting them. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people living in those areas, but those are not on the market. So there's that. Then so the insurrection happens. So all this different stuff is going on. And I know I'm forgetting other things, but we're also having like massive floods, massive weather incidents happening all over the country. We're having riots in different parts of the country. Portland was a big one. You're seeing a lot of homelessness happening. You're also seeing at the end of last year, the last quarter, all the FANG companies let go all those tech workers, thousands and thousands of tech workers from all the major tech companies like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Netflix, Google, chopped Twitter, etc. All those big companies chopped part of their workforce. Now, I mean, I've seen massive layoffs before from the 80s. That's not a surprise to anybody. This is the first time these kids seen it. And this was massive. This was more so than because it was all these companies at once doing it, flooding the job market. So here you have the housing market tightening up and you have the job market tightening up because you have people, thousands and thousands of people competing for the same job. So it's giving this sense of scarcity and it's threatening people's very essence of providing for their families and their basic necessities. It's putting that at jeopardy. And there's inflation, ever increasing inflation. The cost of goods and the cost of living has increased significantly in the last several years. Plus, there's also still supply chain issues going on. There's all these different things. But I mentioned George Floyd. I mentioned all the racial tension. I mentioned all like the social tension between, well, I'm mentioning it now, feminism and patriarchy and all that. And they want to overthrow patriarchy. And that's just a constant thing. And there's certain apps that are prevalent on this stuff. So there's that. There's that stuff. Then we're starting to hear more and more about aliens. More and more about aliens happening. And that's just like people are just numb to it. They're not even responding. But it's being put out more and more by the government. Um, the congressional hearings that happened a few weeks back, and then also even more weather events. Like in June, we had massive wildfires in Canada and also New Jersey. It caused a lot of air quality issues here, but also put that fear that the wildfires are not going to get under control and it's destroying a lot of land, etc. On top of that, there's been flooding. 2021, I experienced a flood in my apartment building because there was mass flooding in the area and I had to evacuate my apartment for 6 weeks. But we've also recently, in June, after the fires, we had several massive downpours where it just washed out roads. It washed out our driveway, washed out roads, washed out our neighbor's driveway. He had a gigantic crater in his driveway, washed out the bridge down the street from us. Like, we had to take detours for weeks to get all that stuff before they can finally like temporarily fix it. So you're seeing a lot of different things happening. What my whole point is like all these massive events, like I'm sure there are things happening like every month or every other month at this point since the pandemic. And my whole point is that it's not letting up. So going back to the first point I made, I'm pretty sure I covered everything that I wanted to cover, that I wanted to make sure I mentioned. Like I said, I mentioned the thing about the aliens, January insurrection, but now getting back to what I said about Mel Brooks talking about civil war in 2024. So now if you look at Trump, what he caused during the election, and then what he caused during the second election with the insurrection, and everything in between. And now 2024 is coming. He's getting indicted left, right, and center right now, currently, as things are happening for him. But he's still being talked about as being a candidate, as being like a front runner candidate for the right, for the conservatives, which is just, it's my thing is the way I'm looking at how everything has played out over the last 5, 6 years, that if he gets elected president next year, it's going to pop off. It is going to set things off. All hell is going to break loose. That is my theory, my feelings on everything that has occurred over the last several years, that he's just going to cause a massive civil war of some kind or massive disruption in 2024. I would say around the presidential election time. I could be completely wrong about it. I'm just going on my feeling about it. I do ask my source self these things, whether or not it's accurate, but it's just my hunch, okay, based on observations. And really, nothing's stopping. Nothing is stopping. It's just increasing. It's just increasing. So my whole point is just to be mindful, be aware of all this stuff when you put it all together and you just see I see what it's doing to the NPCs on a regular basis because I watch them on TikTok. I'm out in public a lot, these different things, and I've just seen massive changes in them over the last couple of years. That's why I dislike being around the public that much more and more. Um, and that's it. It's just something to be mindful of. Also to consider making sure if you don't have a passport, get one because I've certainly considered to get it now at this point. And also make sure you have your cash backup. That's something I have to put in place as well. That I've struggled to do for the last several years. But these things, and I mean, I've personally toyed with the idea of moving away, moving either into a different part of the country or out of the country. And I may not have to do both and I may not do both, but the option's there. And I've been toying with it more and more over the last several months. Just as an option and also changing up, not changing up entirely, but also, looking for remote work, things that is 100% remote that I can do from any part of the country. That's something that I'm definitely trying to nail down, that I can also do pet care in addition to it. So anyway, that's what it is. Take it for what it's worth. I don't want to run too far into this. I wanted to cover all those points. I really think that he's going to be the catalyst that breaks the camel's back, that sets people off in a massive way. Because I really don't think that if he gets elected again, that they're going to take it. And if he doesn't get elected again, there could be the possibility that the other side that caused the insurrection rises up again and causes mass hysteria. I don't know. Again, I'm not making it like a solid prediction. I'm just kind of saying this is what I think is going to happen. And that's it. So something to consider, something to think about. You ask your source self if it's something that you even have to bother thinking about, and just take it for what it is. If it doesn't have any significance, just bye. That's it. It's cool. I'm not mad. You're not mad. Nothing to worry about either way.